Hey, folks, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you aboard. Let's do our regular little routine. Let's make sure that you can see and hear me all right. So I'm going to just type a quick message. Can you see and hear me? Let me know if you can see and hear me all right. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Heliana. All right, Hiram. Fantastic. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, both you in attendance and those of you watching this after the fact. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, doing a live stream, first of all, is challenging. I totally get that. It's kind of hard to come off of, especially if you had a big Father's Day meal last night or something like that, barbecue. So I really appreciate those that are coming in and joining us here at our early morning class. Second, those of you who are watching after the fact, you get kudos too, because I don't know about you, but for me, watching a live stream after the fact, like watching it like a video, just feels weird to me. You know, I can watch, well, I do watch YouTube videos all day long. I can watch YouTube videos all day long, but watching a live stream afterwards feels kind of like I'm disassociated with the video. And so it's challenging for me. So those of you who are watching afterwards, kudos to you too. Okay, let's jump into our lecture today. So I'm going to come over here to our presentation. So this week really kicks off our assertions video assignment. We're going to go over that. But this is all about learning how to influence our audience. That's what this week really focuses on, figuring out how to best influence our audience. So what, oh, hold on, I pushed the wrong button. Okay, now I'm with the right button. So this is what we're going to do with our agenda. The first part, we're going to talk about organizational change management. Now, you might say, what does this have to do with influencing an audience? It has everything to do with it. So I'll show you what we mean here when we get started. So we're going to talk about organizational change management, OCM. When you're in the business world, that's what they'll call it, OCM. And then what we're going to do is go into the assertions video assignment in detail, this Unit 2 process, right? You're going to do more than the assignment. You're going to do script, your storyboard, the audience analysis. We'll go over all that in detail. So that's kind of our two-parter today. So with that, let's jump into organizational change management. So to kind of set the stage for this, let me ask you to kind of think about this for a moment. As you know from our previous discussions and videos, the purpose of business communication is to inform, influence, and affect the attitudes and feelings and behaviors of ourselves and others. For an example going on right now is with COVID-19, right? How do you influence others to, say, practice social distancing? How do you influence them to wear a face mask when going into the store, right? And different companies will have different, communication techniques. But ultimately, you're trying to change their behavior, right? That's really what internal communication is all about internally, is changing the behavior of your employees. So influencing and affecting behavior of others necessarily means changing behavior. And you know what? We resist change. All of us do, me included, right? We all resist change. And so in many ways, business communication is all about overcoming that resistance and persuading people to embrace change. And so that's what we're going to go over in detail today. Change management, why people resist, how to overcome resistance, all through the lens of communication. Okay? So, with that, there's one more thing we have to think about when it comes to internal change management. Now, remember, just a refresher, internal business communication is all about communicating internally with the organization so that we can get the work done efficiently, effectively, on schedule, liking each other, all that stuff, right? So how are we going to collaborate with our fellow employees? How are we going to collaborate with management? And how are we going to work across departments? All that good stuff. Well, the thing about change is when it comes to doing business, you don't stop business to make a change. Now, I guess in the case of COVID, we did, but that's not what we want to do, right? Business keeps going, business keeps moving, and yet we're changing things in business quite often while we're still doing business. And so the analogy that is used all the time in internal business change management is it's like changing a tire while driving. You don't get to stop, business continues, but there's still change to be made. So kind of think about that and think about change. I'm going to give tons of examples in my career, but I want you to think of examples in your career of where you've had to keep moving forward even though change was underway. Okay, so let's talk about different types of change. There's really 3 types of change we want to consider. One is what we call static change. This is definitive, occurring almost immediately. It's just a rip the Band-Aid off, change at one single moment, on-off switch, if you will. So, for example, company policies are often static change. It's just when you left one day, the policy was A, and when you show up the next day, the policy is B, and that's it, right? And so these changes tend to be sudden, immediate, and fairly clear. I mean, I'm not saying absolutely clear, I'm just saying fairly clear. So these sort of just kind of happen and you let it be. That is in contrast with incremental change. Now, incremental change takes place in small, regular steps occurring over a period of time. So, for example, right now we're working on reopening the campus, reopening the economy, trying to figure out how are we going to move from utter shutdown to getting things up and running. Well, as you've noticed, it hasn't been an immediate static change where one day we're not working and the next day we are working. It's incremental. And so we're experiencing this right now to a tremendous degree, say at Salt Lake Community College. You are internal partners at Salt Lake Community College. And so as the college announces to you that, well, in the fall semester, some classes will be lectures, some will be online, some will be broadcast remote like this, and you'll have more information as we come along. We'll have some policies around face masks and social distancing, and it's an ever-changing environment. You are the audience for Salt Lake Community College as the communicator when it comes to this incremental change. Now, as you can well imagine, and as you are experiencing, no doubt, incremental change kind of is fluid and ever-changing, not always clear. You know you're going through incremental change when you're just kind of pulling your hair out and say, when are they going to finally get it right? You know, they keep changing the change. One day they say this, the next day they say this, the next day they say that, and who knows what they'll say tomorrow. That's kind of the frustrating nature of incremental change in that way. And you're experiencing it, and I'm sure you have in the workplace as well. You're going to experience it, and as corporate communicators, you will be helping to overcome these issues going forward. Okay, the third one is dynamic change. Dynamic change is just always happening. There is no start and end. It's just always, always happening. The graphic I have here, for example, are, software updates and patches. Seems like every single time I log into one of my video games or I log into Zoom or something like that, they say, oh, we have a patch, we have an update. It's kind of like, oh, great. Okay. This is dynamic change. Business processes in the interest of continuous improvement are always changing, right? Thing is, it's never ending, right? So it's pretty easy to kind of get annoyed with it, just never ending. And the path to progress is not always clear. What I mean by that is obviously these dynamic changes are all based on continuous improvement, never done, but we don't always agree that we're on the path to continuous improvement. Think about a time where, one of your favorite computer games did a patch or did a new batch or opened a new level or something, and it was supposed to be the greatest change in the world, and then you play it, and it's like, this is crap, right? That's an example of where we don't always agree that we're taking the organization or the process or the project in the right direction. Okay, so those are the three sort of main buckets of corporate change that we're having to deal with. Yeah, Lena, phone updates. This drives my wife nuts. Now, of course, we're part of an older generation where the idea of a phone update, well, it shouldn't happen all that often. It happens all the time, and it drives her batty. And by the way, this is real, folks. A lot of these phone updates are meant to be sort of planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence meaning we're going to do more and more updates that your old phone cannot really process properly. And so after 3 or 4 years, you're going to feel compelled to buy a new phone because your old one doesn't work anymore because of all the updates. That's planned obsolescence, but that's a different class. But Lena, you're dead on right. Great example. Okay. All right. So we got all this change. Now we tend, excuse me, my voice is cracking. We tend to resist change. Now, there's a really cool video that I've included in Canvas on why do we resist change. Really awesome video. Please watch it. It's one of my favorites of all time. I wish it were one of my videos. But let's talk about resistance to change. We kind of like things going along status quo. We like the comfortable. We like the predictable. We like to stay in our sort of, day-to-day comfort zones. So when change comes along, we really kind of have to be persuaded that it's the right kind of change. But there's any number of ways that we resist this crap, right? So let's talk about some of the ways and reasons that we resist change. First, though, I want to ask you, why do you resist change? And we're going to go to our little, question slide here in a moment. Think about it, process it. Think of a time recently, or maybe far in the past, it doesn't matter, where you were asked to change and you wanted to resist it. You resisted the change, or you wanted to resist it. Why did you resist it? And I'll share with you some of my stories as well. So, why did you resist change? Let's go ahead and play with that idea. Okay, you guys are good. All right, let's look at some of these because you're bang on right. All right, so Christopher said the outcome seems uncertain and if it isn't broken, don't fix it, right? So those are a couple, right? Sometimes they're proposing a change and you're looking at the proposed outcome and you're like, I'm not buying into that outcome. I don't even fully understand it. You're not doing a good job communicating the desired outcome to me. Communication. Furthermore, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. It's like, okay, change disrupts things. Why are you disrupting it if it's working fine? Very good. Let's see, Madison. I resist change because it's not comfortable. I like to feel in control. Yes. Here's the thing. We actually are pretty darn good at living our lives. You are. You're really good. And we have our habits. We have our routines. We kind of have our ducks in a row. And we're actually highly efficient and effective at doing what we need to do. And so when change comes along, we lose that control. We lose that predictability. It's very uncomfortable. Totally good. Hiram said, sometimes I feel comfortable with what I am doing. Change requires work and a lot of thinking. I like this because you know what? And this is a good thing. I'm about to say something that sounds pejorative, but it's not. It's a good thing. We actually live our lives a lot on autopilot, but that's good because that means that we can go about the daily routines and functions of life without dedicating a whole lot of brain power to it. So we can dedicate brain power to things that really matter. Well, when change comes along, we have to rethink things, and that is hard. I often say, hey, if you want an example of this, tomorrow when you get out of the shower, dry your body off in reverse. Now, that might sound pretty straightforward, but no, when you dry off, you're drying off with muscle memory in the same way you've always done it. If you have to do it in reverse, you're going to get totally discombobulated, and it requires thinking. And that's just drying off. Imagine work, right? Yeah, you're right, Hiram. Okay, Brickell, because getting used to change takes time. All the time that you could be using to get work done, to be productive, to enjoy life, you're now having to dedicate to change. Pain in the ass. Okay, Lena, change can be scary sometimes. Yes. Okay. We've kind of set up this nice little life here, and we know how to function in this life. And when change comes along, it challenges kind of how we live our lives, how we do our jobs, and all that stuff. Absolutely. Guys, you're dead on right. We are now going to go into detail on why we resist change, and you are going to see a lot of your points expressed in the research. Okay? So, once again, I pushed the wrong button. All right. Now, the first one is complacency. Satisfied with the status quo, see no real need for change. Now, this kind of goes along with the, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Everything's fine. It's doing great, right? So, for example, you probably have friends. I have friends and family, okay? I have friends and family who have remained in the very same job they had right out of high school. And they don't want to go on to college. They don't want to add new skill sets. They don't want to grow in any career because I'm fine. I'm fine. Okay, the status quo, totally good. I don't see a need for change. Now, it could be they are fine. All right, I'll go ahead and grant you that. It could be they are fine. But the research shows that where those who stay in a sort of minimum wage job out of high school, their growth trajectory is pretty flat. Those who go on and get an associate's or a bachelor's or even a master's, their growth trajectory in terms of income goes up, right? And so you, as college students, will actually benefit from the change that others have resisted, the idea of going on to college. Okay, Now, another one is conservatism, meaning this is the way we've always done it. We're loyal to the old ways. We have all these safeguards. And I mean, we have all these resources and our name brand and our customers, and we want to safeguard these. We don't want to take any chances. Change can be scary. Right, Lena? Change can be scary. And so we're just going to do the old ways. It's always worked. It's always been good. It served our great-grandparents fine. We're going to keep going the same way. Now, I'll give you an example in my own career, right? Expensive textbooks, lectures, and real academics. So as you know, this is an OER class, meaning you don't have to buy a textbook. You know, the text is me. The texts are these videos, these presentations. The texts are the readings that I assign, all free. And furthermore, I am not a born and bred academic, okay? Sure, I have a PhD and 10 years teaching experience, but I grew up in the corporate world. I spent 25 years with a master's in business administration working for Intel and eBay and PayPal and all those companies. So the old guard, the old academia would say, I'm not a teacher. I'm not using a textbook. I'm not giving traditional lectures. And I did, I worked outside of academia. That's kind of, holding on to the vestiges of old academia. Many companies do this. I'm not just slamming academia. Many companies do this. Okay, next one, conceit. I don't say that I have any weaknesses. I'm not at risk anywhere. There are no threats out there. The way I'm doing it is just fine. I'm totally set up. I've got it all figured out. Well, this is a problem. I'll give you an example. When I worked for Intel Corporation during the Great Recession, yeah, remember when we thought that was a Great Recession? Yeah, wait till you see what we're living through. So, Great Recession. Our CEO at the time said, you know what, we're fine. Intel has been through, and I'm not kidding. I was in the room when he was saying this. He says, listen, Intel has been through, 7 or 8 recessions. We know how to work through them. Our position is solid. Our customers are solid. Our product is solid. We're fine. All right. We're just going to keep doing the things that we do best. And like every other recession we've ever been in, we're going to come out smelling like a rose. Well, spoiler alert, Intel didn't come out smelling like a rose. It really hurt. And even the CEO years later, looked back and said, I missed that one. I really missed it. That's conceit. Companies like Intel, trust me, they're conceited. Don't get me wrong, Intel's the best company in the world. But they're conceited because they're the best company in the world. And so they can often be blind to threats out there in the environment. Okay. Unclear direction from leadership. All right. Maybe there's a lack of knowledge that the employees have to really embrace the change. So I think it was Christopher who said outcome seems uncertain. This is unclear direction from leadership. You haven't really communicated to me how this is going to work and where we're going to land. And so I'm not going to embrace the change. Inadequate or unclear communication on what is entailed, what is necessary for this change to happen. All in all, the goals and expectations are unclear. So, for example, many organizations, a fair number of organizations, kind of have what's called a 2-in-the-box. Hey, Simran, a 2-in-a-box leadership style, meaning basically 2 VPs, 2 vice presidents over one organization. I have worked in organizations like this, and it's very discombobulating. It's very disorientating. You just don't know who to follow because both have different leadership styles and different visions. this often results in unclear direction from leadership. Another one is it really can change our reason for being. Okay, so we look at the proposed change, and we see that it has negative effects on our own personal interests. We kind of like the way things are. The way things are give us a raison d'etre, a reason for being. We have an identity in the current situation, the current state. And if you change the current state, then my identity is lost. And I don't know what's going to become of my identity in this organization if this change goes through. So, I'll give you an example. I had an employee, this was years ago at Intel. We're going to call him Ted. And he was really, really, really good. His job was to run this one piece of software for HR. And everybody in HR needed Ed to do something with this system. But here's the thing, the system was horrible. It was an awful system. It was what we would call a legacy system. It was atrocious to use. And so nobody would bother learning to use it. They would just go to Ted and say, hey, can you do this for me? Now, we're talking, thousands and thousands of HR employees around the world calling Ted every day saying, can you do this for me in the system? Well, Ted basically created a job for himself. He was the guru. Only he in the entire company knew how to use this legacy system, and he was indispensable. I mean, really, all right? He was at times the most important person in the company. I'm not making that up. Well, one day Intel decides we're going to get rid of this legacy system and we're going to replace it with a new, easier, user-friendly system that everybody in HR can use, on their own with minimal training. Well, this basically erased Ted's job and his raison d'etre, his reason for being, and his identity in the company. And it was very, very, very difficult for him. So maybe you've experienced something like that before. Okay, another one. Maybe we disagree with the ethics of the change. We believe that the proposed change is unethical, inappropriate, does not align with our corporate values. So, for example, I was, at Intel, and Intel for 30 years, 30 years, had a zero layoff policy. Layoffs were not a part of the corporate culture. And they had other programs instead, and these programs were much better than layoffs. Redeployments and reassignments and so forth, they were great. Well, Intel made the decision during the Great Recession to lay off 1,000 managers. And Intel said this is a one-time thing. Well, a lot of people pushed back, not because they didn't agree that something had to be done, but because they perceived that layoffs was a breach of kind of a psychological corporate culture contract. We are a no layoff company. And for Intel to start practicing layoffs, many perceived as a breach of the contract, an unethical decision. Still another one is disagreement with the nature of the change. Now, in this one, everybody agrees that some sort of change is necessary. We agree change is necessary. However, we disagree on the specifics around the change. What needs to be done, how it needs to be done, whether the timing is right, or if the change is being managed properly. For example, closing and reopening the economy. Everybody agreed that we needed to address the coronavirus to some extent. with a few exceptions, nobody said, heck, it's just a common cold, chill out. There were some of those, but for the most part, people agreed that we need to do something. But we did not have agreement on what to do or how it should be done. Same thing goes with opening our economy. Now, we all agree we need to get back to work. I mean, we cannot, put our economy on pause forever. All right. It just can't be done. But how are we going to reopen it? How are we going to ensure safety and health while at the same time, firing up the engines of our productivity once again? This is an example of disagreement with the nature of the change. Okay? So, then the last one, and this one's actually kind of one of my favorites, is I'm just tired of all the change. I'm just tired of it. It's a reaction to the experience of all the changes that have been going on, cumulative effect of change in one's life. After a while, you're just kind of like, I don't care. I don't care. So the example I like to give, and I understand you may not truly relate to this example on an emotional level, but when I was in the corporate world, and it still happens here in academia, just not as much, they would change their enterprise systems all the time. Now, what's an enterprise system? An enterprise system is a, computer system that is used across the entire company. So, for instance, my SLCC is an enterprise system for all SLCC students. And so corporations would forever change their enterprise systems to the point of where it just drove me batty. It was just like, what? The analogy I'd often give is you're buying a new car and then driving it directly to another dealership to trade it in for a new car, and then driving that off to a dealership to trade it in for a new car. You're never gaining any value from the car before you trade it for another. And that's how I perceived they were dealing with their enterprise systems. Drove me nuts. I hated it. All right. Okay, so now we don't like the change for all those reasons, right? All those reasons. And we resist change. So I'm going to share stories of where I've resisted change. I would like you to do the same. Give me examples of how you resisted change in the past. It can be a change that you were successful in resisting and were able to push away, or change that you resisted for a while but eventually got on board. Give me an example of how you resisted change. Did you just ignore it? Did you fight against it? Did you offer another solution? Did you, what did you do? So give this some thought and tell me how you resisted change in the past. All right, I don't see too much. Are you coming in and putting something? Now we're going. I know there's a delay. Let's make sure we're engaging with this. So let's take a look at this. All right, so Christopher said, ignored really understanding the details of the change because it would change and again in a matter of days, weeks. This is one of my favorites. Okay. Christopher, you and I, virtual fist bump. I do this all the time. It's like, okay, listen. I know you're just going to change it again. You're all excited about it right now, dear leadership, and you're trying to sell it. And, you got this line of cheerleaders and they're hooping and hollering, but you're just going to change it again. I don't have faith that this change is going to stick. So I'm just going to ignore the details and let it fly by. Yeah, this is one of my favorites in my toolbox. So yeah, there you go, Christopher. Virtual fist bump. All right, well, let's play with some of these. We're going to see this one come up. If you have others that you think about as we're coming along, please put them in the comments. We want to keep this conversation going. Okay, so let's play with this. First of all, we have active resistance. This is where we are actually actively resisting the change. All right. Now, Stephen here said transitioning from in-person classes to face. Yeah, right. Face-to-face relationship with the professor, friend groups to online classes that are self-paced and relatively socially isolated. Really tough, right? Totally agree. Okay. Active resistance are things like ridiculing the change, actively ridiculing the change. Not just, yeah, no. You're out there doing it. Really ugly criticism. These jackasses wouldn't know their head from their hindquarters and so forth. And recruiting, actually trying to recruit groups of people to join you in this active resistance. Okay, this is hanging out by the proverbial water cooler, if you will, and griping and grousing about the change and trying to get more and more people on board with you to destructively resist the change. Now, these are destructive forms of active resistance. However, there are actually constructive forms of active resistance. Okay, resistance is not bad. Actually, sometimes we really need to resist. All right, underline that. Anyway, so constructive forms of active resistance are things like, let's talk. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's discuss it. Because I do not agree where this is going, but I want to give you the benefit of the doubt of where your vision is taking us. Let's talk about this because there might be other ways to consider, other options, other ways that we can consider reaching your vision. Debating, all right? Let's get ideas out there on the table. Let's explore them. Let's critically analyze these options and see if we can't come up with something that can, reach a broader market, right? Negotiating. Right? This is where, once again, we say, listen, I know you want A, B, and C. I want X, Y, and Z. There's got to be a way that we can put something together that, makes sense for the largest number of people. You very much want to participate in constructive resistance. You want to be a partner at the table. But then we have passive resistance. Now, for example, Christopher, what you and I tend to do, which is ignore really understanding the details and just letting it change on its own because we know it will. This is a form of passive resistance. Now, as you see, there's a thumbs down on passive resistance. Yes, I participate in inappropriate forms of resistance just like everybody else. So let's take a look at this. Passive resistance is when we agree verbally, but then we don't follow through, right? So failing to implement the change. Yeah, I'm not going to implement it because you're going to change it again. Why am I going to stress over this? Procrastinating, feigning ignorance. So Christopher, when you say, ignoring and not really understanding the details, That's kind of feigning ignorance. Oh, I didn't know. Well, gee, well, I guess we're going to change it again in the future anyway. Christopher says, I've seen this at my workplace. We're often puzzled by who makes the big decision and question their effectiveness. We often feel alienated and undervalued and not being consulted. Yes, yes. This is what internal communication is all about. That right there, what Christopher says. We want to engage with our employees, with our leaders, with our managers, with our peers, so that we can bring about appropriate and the best kind of change in a way that everybody can understand, embrace, and follow. Withholding, standing by, allowing the change to fail. Yeah, that's passive resistance. Okay? So, let's talk about how to actually do effective change management. All right. So we understand that there's three different kinds of change: static, dynamic, and incremental. Right. We examined all the ways that change kind of challenges us and why we resist change. And then we've looked at some of the ways that we've actually resisted. Okay. So with that in mind, following off of Christopher's comment here, we feel alienated and undervalued by not being consulted, right? Let's look at how we need to fix this. All right. 4 phases, 4 steps. Phase 1, engaging in the change. So what you want to do, and yes, we're talking you, okay? I'm training leaders here, okay? I'm training people who one day will be in corporations, will be in companies responsible for doing this. And by the way, I kid you not, I've gotten many emails, one just like 2 weeks ago, from a student who took this class who said, hey, I've now been tasked with leading a change project, and I want you to know that the stuff you talked about, bang on right. So you need to evaluate the current business. What is happening today? And then you want to define a compelling vision for the future. Now, I want you to really think about that. A compelling. What does compelling mean? Well, if we were to Google compelling, I don't know, I suppose I could pull it up, but I'm not gonna. Compelling is just something that causes people to want to engage, want to dedicate time and energy and passion to it, to drive them forward. It's almost pulling them into action. This is compelling. So you want to define a compelling vision, a vision that inspires them, that emboldens the employees for a future state that they can go, oh, I totally want to be there. Imagine a world in which we're in that future state. I'm on board. Then you want to make the case for it. All right. Now, I like the way that Christopher said this, not being consulted. No, you want to go to them and you want to make the case. You want to sell them, but you also want to engage with them, to bring them on board in this engaging in the change phase. And engage the stakeholders. This is what we're really talking about here, Christopher. You are the stakeholders. Remember, you guys know this. A stakeholder is anybody who has a vested interest in the outcome of the change. Well, as employees, as students, you have a vested interest in the outcome of any change that your company or Salt Lake Community College enacts. And so a good change management plan engages with you, consults with you, and negotiates with you, because there's going to be resistance. The real trick to resistance is not squashing it. No. The trick to resistance is taking it from passive and negative to active and turning them into discussions, conversations, negotiations, all that sort of stuff. That's what engaging with the stakeholders is all about. You don't ignore resistance, you don't squash resistance, you don't punish resistance, you engage with resistance. That's key. Okay, that's phase one. Phase two, actually prepare for the change. This isn't something we want to do just going off half-cocked. We want to prepare for it. So, establish a governance structure. That's fancy corporate speak for who's in charge, what processes are we going to follow in implementing this change, how are we going to monitor it to make sure that we're on track, and who's going to be responsible for timeline, allocating resources, things like that. Next thing is map it out, okay? Especially if it's an incremental change, you want to really make sure that to the extent possible, the change is predictable and rational, and people can understand where we're going at what time. You want to bring all your resources together, get the right people in the right room with the right resources so they can get the right job done, and then prepare people for the change with ongoing communication. Not just, hey, by the way, we're going to change this, we'll let you know when we're done. No. We're talking about ongoing communication, constant communication. We want to make sure that everybody involved, our stakeholders and those involved in the change, those affected by the change, know what's happening when, so that they feel the sense of predictability and control. Just like Madison said earlier, I feel like I'm not in control. Well, with constant communication, people feel a sense of predictability and control. All right, that's phase two. Let's look at phase three. Let's actually deliver the change now. So we want to develop pathfinder projects that introduce the change, such as pilots and quick wins. So let me explain what that means. Some changes are big, right? And a lot of them we're not quite sure how they're going to work. So maybe you do small pilot projects, small pilot changes. So you implement the change in, say, one campus, one region, one area, or with one group. And then you kind of learn from that so that you can then expand it to, help others. So it's kind of like a pilot episode of a TV show. They'll do the pilot, see if there's any interest, and then get feedback from the viewers and then tweak the show so that when they launch the real series, they've got all the bugs worked out. Same thing goes with developing a pilot project. Create symbols of change, clear results and wins resulting from the change. So let's talk through this. First of all, create symbols of change. Well, I'll give you an example here. Let's come over here and we'll go over into Canvas. We'll get there. Oh, it's going to make me do the duo factor. I apologize. Give me un momento, por favor. Okay. Boom, right there. A symbol of the change, right? SLCC safe, and there it is, a nice little virus. And so when we click there, we see things hashtag SLCC safe. And we know that when we see that symbol, they're probably going to be talking about something around the virus. We see this in posters and, banners on emails and in communications and so forth. We tend to communicate through symbolism, and so you create symbols for the change so when people see it, they immediately recognize it. Same thing goes for celebrating quick wins, right? You want to make sure that people feel like, hey, this is really happening, and look at this was really cool. Right? We have this new feature. We have this new function. We have this new process that's better than what we did before. So people start to become much more invested in the change. Then what you want to do is, take people with you in their hearts and minds as you deliver these quick wins and these high value wins, and people start to become committed. They start to see the vision and they start to get excited. Now you're bringing them along. Now they're almost pushing for the change to go faster versus resisting. I've seen this before. I've seen employee populations who resisted the change and then accepted it and then moved over to pushing for it to be done faster because they were so excited for it. And then finally, ensuring that the business keeps working. All right. Remember, I said that doing change internally in a business is kind of like changing the tire while still flying down the freeway. You need to make sure that when you're going through the changes that the system, the business is still running. KTBR, keep the business running. There's an acronym for you. Okay, 4, final one. Sustaining the change. Here's the deal. It's one thing to get somebody to change. It's another thing to get them to keep the change. It's kind of like when you decide to work out, right? Or you decide to start exercising, or you decide to, start studying at this time every day, something or another. You might do it for a day or two, but then you kind of drop off, right? By the way, mea culpa. I do it all the time. Ergo, we want to make sure that we can sustain the change that we worked so hard to implement. So, manage total change by develop sustaining mechanisms and metrics to reinforce the change. Here's the idea. Whatever gets measured and rewarded gets done. So if you measure people changing their behavior and reward people changing their behavior, they are going to keep that change in place. And this is all about communication. Okay, we want to make sure that we recognize and reward people for embracing the new behavior. That is a role of internal communication. Reward the new behaviors. Ensure that the change delivers the desired, business impact. In other words, we said the change would do A, B, and C. Let's really make sure it's doing A, B, and C. Okay? And so, boom, there you go. That was your what? Your 50-minute crash course in change management, total change management, TCM, organizational change management, OCM, all kinds of terms for it. Let's do this now. I'm going to do a quick break. I'll pull something off my shelf and I'll talk about while we take a quick break. And then what I'm going to do when we come back is we are going to go over Unit 2, the assertions video, the whole unit there. So that means we're going to come, let's pull up our class. I'm going to talk you through everything here in practice the techniques for making assertions. We'll go through all these so that you know exactly what you're looking for, not only what you need to do, not only this week, but over the next, 4 weeks or so as a team. So let's take like a 5-minute break. If you want to stick around, I'll pull something off my shelf. I'll talk you through it just for the fun of it. Otherwise, you can go off, do a bio break. That's what we would call them at Intel, bio breaks. And we'll come back in 5 minutes. All right. Oh, hey, so let me come back over here. I'm going to pull this down. Check this out. Isn't this cool? So this is Fer Rouge, red light, red fire, Fer Rouge. It's it goes on a caboose of an old train, right? that thing would be hanging from the back of the train and doing all its cool stuff and just really neat. Now I love stuff like this. I just think it's cool. It's old, it's rustic and so forth. I actually found this at Gardner Village. Gardner Village, you know where that is, in Salt Lake. Now, I originally my paternal grandfather had one of these as a kid, and as a kid, I loved it. I just thought it was the coolest darn thing. And when he passed away, I'm trying to see. Gosh, when he passed away, that was supposed to come over to me. Um, but us shift bowers, we don't really hang on to this stuff and kind of gets trashed. And we're not really genealogy, focused on genealogy, family history, not like my wife's side of the family. And so I never got it. And so when I saw this in Gardner Village, I thought, oh, I'm totally going to get that. I just think that thing is so cool. Unfortunately, you don't really see it in my videos very well because it's up in the corner and it's kind of in a dark corner. You can just barely see it a little bit, but I think it's awesome. All right, we'll wait another couple minutes for folks to come on back. So how was everyone's Father's Day? Let's see here. What did anybody do anything particular for Father's Day? We did ribs. We cooked ribs. And I actually had the whole family over. It was kind of cool. I'll be posting a picture on my Instagram here. We took 2 family pictures. Now, I don't care about I shouldn't say I don't care about the family pictures. It's my wife who really wants the family picture. She's like psychotic about it. But when Mother's Day was around, the weather was bad. It just didn't work. Hair wasn't right. She wanted the boys to get trims and all that. And then we tried it again. It didn't work. So we went ahead and did pictures yesterday. Worked out great. And of course, since it's 2020, we did one family picture, everybody together, and then we did another one with masks on. So I'll post that on my Instagram here probably today. So check it out. Yeah, go to my Instagram. Instagram. There we go, and you can check those out. All right, what time? One more minute. And connect with me in LinkedIn. Madison, I got your connection, your invitation. Thank you. Let's connect up. I know we need to figure out a time to do a Zoom meeting, but we'll do that. Okay. All right. So it's been about 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and talk through our this unit 2. There we go. Unit 2. Now, as you remember, what we did at the beginning, these first 6 weeks or so, is we gathered all the tools for internal communication. We talked about purpose, audience, channels, format, messaging, and audience. We talked about demographics, psychographics, context, stakeholders, all that stuff. And then we also talked about how to come together as teams, right? We talked about the Tuckman model, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And we talked about how to move from each phase to the next phase. And then we also talked about how to hold effective meetings and how to give and receive and ask for feedback. So these were all the tools to effective communication. Now, yeah, it was like drinking through a fire hose, but now it's time to actually practice using these tools. So as we look at this, I want you to think about that. I want you to kind of embrace the idea that this first team assignment, this video, is all about practicing working as a team and using the tools of effective communication. Now, what I'm actually going to do, I should have done this before, is let's start with the end in mind. We're going to practice some Stephen Covey and start with the end in mind. What are you ultimately going to do? Well, ultimately, you are going to create a video, all right? I am going to assign a purpose and an audience. And as you'll see in here, your purpose is to give students some tips and tricks on how to manage conflict. Your audience is Salt Lake Community College students, and your channel will be a video. So in this case, I have decided all the top three. I've decided your purpose, teach them about conflict management. I've decided your audience, Salt Lake Community College students, and I've decided your channel, a video. In the future, in your main project, you're going to decide all that stuff. But here, we're just practicing. So I want to kind of take some of the decisions off of your plate so you can focus on coming together as a team and using the techniques of communication. So with that in mind, when we look at the actual assignment, this video, teach conflict resolution to Salt Lake Community College students. Here's some additional information for your success. The length of the video. Remember my policy on length. Okay? My policy on length is I don't care about length. Some information. Also gives you some great tools and websites and things you can use on creating a video. Here's an assignment here's something that another team put together. So tons of resources here. So that is the end, starting with the end in mind. And so with that, let's start at the beginning now. You are going to start here and you'll come along and you're going to watch. This is this week. And so we've lectured on change management. This is the cool video that I told you about that I said I wish was my video. It's really good. You'll want to watch this. You really want to watch this. But in this week, we're just talking about the idea of change management. So then we continue to come along. All right, we've got that. And then you're going to have a assertions video team meeting. In this team meeting, what you're basically just going to kind of decide is, roles and responsibilities in this video. So who's going to work on the script? Who's going to work on the storyboard? Who's going to work on the audience analysis? This will all make sense here in a moment. Who's going to be responsible for shooting the video? Who's going to edit the video? Who's going to do any graphics or voiceovers that need to be done? Things like that, okay? So you really want to kind of come together as a team and talk details in who is going to do what to make this successful. Because remember, one of the main objectives of this assignment is for you folks to come together as a team. In fact, if you hand in the crappiest video in the world, but you say, you know what, we feel like we've really gelled as a team, you're getting an A. On the other hand, if you hand in a fantabulous video, and I'm getting emails from all the team members saying, I want off of this team, these people suck, I'm going to have some real issues, okay? So the objective is coming together as a team. All right. So we've got that. All right, that concludes Module 8, which is this week. But let's keep going. We're going to look at it all, right? So then you want to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to pull this off? And what you need to do here is you need to do an audience analysis, okay? You need to identify at least 5 demographics and 5 psychographics of Salt Lake Community College students and really kind of talk about these demographics and psychographics as they relate to how you would do a video. So we need to understand our audience before we can influence them. Because, and I really want you to think about this video is meant to change their behavior in regards to how they manage conflict. You cannot change their behavior unless you understand their demographics, psychographics, the context, things like this. And I want you to express these things in regards to how they will inform the making of the video. Now, I'll give you an example. You're going to find that Salt Lake Community College students are highly diverse, okay? We have the most diverse campus in all of Utah. Now, all of Utah, so who knows if that's saying much, right? But the point is we're highly diverse, and that's a good thing. And we want to speak to a diverse audience, which means in your video, whether you do animation or live action or just voiceover, you will want diverse students and voices helping. So if you're going to do live video, you want diverse students on camera, all right? If you're going to do voiceover, you want diverse accents and students doing the voiceover. So that is how you would say, hey, we are highly diverse. Salt Lake Community College students value this. Therefore, in our video, we want to have diversity represented in our video. Now, that's just one of 5, right? But that's what I'm looking for, is how does this fact connect with the video? Okay, so that's your audience analysis. That's for next week. Then you're going to go on for the week after. And in this one, what you're going to do is you're either going to create a script for your video. Hang on, I want to make sure we're still good here. Yep, okay. You're either going to create a script for the video or a storyboard. And I have here some resources that you can use for a script, some videos that talk about it, as well as a template and an example of an actual script that I used. Or you can do a storyboard. Here's some discussion on storyboard. Here's an example. So you're all set there. And then that's your assignment there for the script or storyboard. And that'll take you to module 10. And then you'll actually just start shooting the video. Okay? And that's where we started, with the end in mind. Okay. So that is what you are focusing on both this week and for the next 4 weeks or so. So with that, what I'd like to ask is if there are any questions. That concludes our lecture. You're all set. So if you're totally fine, just say I'm totally fine. But I want to see if there are any questions on anything we've discussed today. So let's come in here and say any questions. And let's see who we have with questions. Anything at all. Or tell me what you had for dinner last night. And if you don't have any questions, do me a favor and just say, no questions, we're good. Okay, Christopher, do we continue to use the meeting minutes template to prove we met with our groups? Okay, prove, right? By the way, it benefits you to meet with the group, right? Use the meeting minutes template because that is a template that really helps you make sure everybody is on the same page. Your ducks are in a row. It moves you from storming to norming and from norming to performing. So meeting minute template is a great tool to use to have an effective team. I don't want you to use it to prove that you met. I want you to use it to come together as a team. But otherwise, no, I don't need a picture. I don't need, any recording or anything like that. At this stage, I want you guys to just move forward and own it. Good question. What other questions do we have? Yeah, I'm spinning in my chair. Probably distracting. Like I say, if you don't have any questions, just do me a favor and say no questions, and that way I know we're all set. Okay, there we go. Lena, good for now. Christopher, no further questions. Fantastic. Okay, Heliana, looks like you're set. Great. Then what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to put us on the ending slide. Thank you very much for joining and for watching afterwards. You guys rock. You're awesome. I'm going to stick around in case any questions come up. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you again soon. We'll see you later.